Telkom Business, behind South African businesses' drive to thrive.
Welcome to this special edition of the Entrepreneurial SME with me, Rams Mabote. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana delivered the mid-term budget statement earlier this month, placing priority on municipal debt relief, energy transition projects, supporting infrastructure investment, and so much more. Yet, the small business sector enjoyed little or no mention in this mini-budget, as it is always referred to. For this roundtable discussion, I'm joined by award-winning entrepreneur and founder of Virtue Business Solutions, and she's also director of Miniboss Business School, Wendy Silinyana. And joining me via Zoom is Managing Executive for Finance at Telkom Business, Hasnain Motlekar. Good evening to both of you, and thank you for coming. I just want to start with your business. I like this Miniboss Business School. Tell me a bit about it.
Thank you, Rams. I would like to greet the viewers at home and also thank you for the opportunity. So Miniboss Business School is an international business school that caters for children between the ages of 6 to 17 and teaching them business skills, leadership, and also giving them an opportunity to start a business while they are still young. And the main objective is to build, the next generation of business leaders from a young age. By the time they graduate, they know how to run a business.
Wow. Excellent. Well, all the best. Should I ever make children again, I'll send them to you. Hasnain, let me start with you. The beauty of doing what we do is that we can have a chat off air, which then helps me to start off with our conversation. You said, unlike me, you found some amazing nuggets in this mini budget statement by the minister. When I said I was so pessimistic about it, please share with me what you found to be interesting.
Good evening, Ryan. So, look, it's not trying to Pollyanna the budget, but there is elements of growth potential that the minister is steering the budget towards. So, I mean, the budget we got was not unforeseen, it was expected. There was going to be elements of austerity measures being seen from the minister, and it was being lined up given that we had this massive windfall from the mining sector of the last 2 years or so. So those revenues were bound to slow down, and we're about to see the knock-on effects of that. At the same time, there was also increased social costs, that expenditure that the government had to actually implement in the budget going forward. So if you look at that and you say strip out the windfall and we're normalizing post the windfall of the tax inflows we saw over the last few years, we're still seeing bits of growth. Granted, it's not the growth that you want to see, 4 or 5%. You're seeing maybe 1% for this year, and then in the medium-term framework, you're probably seeing about 1 to 2%. Not sufficient to overcome our deficits, but there is elements of growth. And if you drill down even further into various elements of the economy, what has been actually very strong over the last year or so has been tourism and agriculture. We've seen a massive inflow of international tourists that has flowed through into various segments that service the tourist industry, and obviously agriculture. We've had a couple of good years in terms of rains and what's come out of the sector of the last. Also pleasing is areas that it was sort of in the doldrums of the last few years was construction. We're seeing there bits of life coming back there, as well as communications and obviously transport. I mean, if you just look at the amount within around our town with the amount of warehousing and logistics businesses springing up there, it talks to a growth that we've not really seen before in the economy. I mean, obviously, also we saw against global macroeconomic conditions, elevated inflation globally, interest costs rising, as well as 2 significant wars taking place that have knock-on effects for us down south. But we're still able to wade through this with fairly okay financial position. I'm not saying it's wonderful. I'm not claiming that we're sitting positive, and we always can see the consumers are under credit and duress. If you just look at the banks that are taking provisions on the consumer books, you can see the consumers deeply under duress. But if you take a longer term view and you see this as the storm, there is elements. The one primary number or statistic that kicked out for me was when you strip out as when you look at the measure is deficit, are you collecting more than you're spending? Or are you spending more than you're collecting? And we have been spending more than we're collecting at about 4%. It's going to go up to 4.9% of GDP. So if you take a simple household, you spend more on your credit card than what you earn, you're always going to end up growing your debt balances. And that has been happening. And we see our debt growing probably towards 5 trillion over the next 5 years, and even touching 6 if based on that, we'll probably get about 77%, 80% of GDP.
Okay, Hasnain, let me come in here. Thank you very much for that, and I truly appreciate it. But Wendy, I don't feel like my fears are laid at all, because the kind of nuggets that Hasnain is pointing out are macro, and they're talking to other issues as opposed to where my concern is about what are we saying, what is government saying about small businesses, about entrepreneurship, about how we can grow the economy from that level upwards.
Thanks, Rem. Appreciating what my fellow panelist has shared, when we look at the country's GDP, small businesses contribute just over 30% of the country's GDP. And for it not to be mentioned in terms of what is, what is forecasting for the next remaining months of the year, to see how you can fully support small businesses. And especially when COVID hit, most small businesses closed. And on top of that, we have an energy crisis that small businesses are still battling to survive, even post-COVID, and also with the interventions of supply of alternative power and so forth. So it is quite looking bleak when we don't see any mention where you kind of have to have a magnifying glass to find the opportunities there.
Aren't we perhaps nitpicking? Maybe because firstly it's a mid-term budget statement, but also because the minister had told us that he's focusing on the crisis that we're facing in the country, that perhaps some of those interventions downstream in the value chain, there are opportunities for small businesses that he probably did not focus on as much as we would have loved to hear.
No, absolutely. Hence, I'm saying that we kind of need to have a magnifying glass to look at those opportunities. There are schemes that are being set up in terms of accessing opportunities through the renewable energy programs. There are, within that space alone, there are programs geared towards women-owned businesses within the renewable energy space. So we need to find, ways to look at it to say, yes, we've not been mentioned, but there are opportunities within what has been said.
Hasnain, as I said, the minister did premise his speech on the fact that it is not business as usual. Times are tough. We need to change the way we're doing things. We need to fasten our belts a bit or tighten them a bit, to spend less and earn more. When that happens, 9 out of 10 times is that buyers of services and goods also buy less, right? And that tends to impact then the producers. And for me, I think when that happens, the small business producer of services and goods is going to be the first sufferer when we tighten our belts.
100%. I ran through the speech, and there was nothing really about small business, but what there was, the one takeaway for me was the fastest growing line item above the debt servicing cost will be infrastructure spend. So when the government does have infrastructure spend, there is knock-on effects and multiplier effects. Obviously, it doesn't deal directly with small business in those areas when it does big infrastructure, but there is an ecosystem and actually does trigger beyond that in terms of logistics, supply, services into that infrastructure spend. So if the government delivers on its commitment and its ambition to actually redirect more of the budget towards infrastructure, there will be knock-on effects within that ecosystem as the expenditure takes hold. Infrastructure always has a multiplier effect, and more so within a small business environment going forward. But obviously it's about ensuring that there's execution cadence and the government lives up to the commitment made in this medium-term budget. And to your point, it is a medium-term budget. It paints more the broader strokes as to how the government's thinking about our position. it's not very detailed. The detail will come in February when we get to the real budget, but it gives us a sense of what's coming, and hopefully, to my fellow panelists' point, there will be more detail around small business, supporting small business, but it's trying to create an environment that's conducive for business going forward. And I spent quite a bit of time on transport and logistics, which are normally done in the prior years. The focus was on power, and to the point that was made earlier, just getting through the power constraint issues. There's quite a lot of focus around the logistics part and understanding the important lever that Transnet and the ports play in this business. So small businesses trade, whether they're shipping a full container, half a container, quarter container, those supply chains or those have to be working efficiently to ensure that the small business. So there's collateral benefits going forward. The commitments and the execution cadence comes through as promised.
There was also some emphasis, Hasnain, on public-private partnerships. You know, this is not new. Government has always spoken about it, but I must say Minister Godongwana spoke a lot more about it. And two things came out for me as he spoke about it. One, are triple Ps the magic solution that we could, you know, see things happening quicker and better in the next 5 years or so? That's one. Two, could that also benefit startups and small businesses?
So on the triple Ps, we're slightly different. I feel that there was three elements. It says, let's clean up our own efficiency. So as opposed to, I think the previous PPPs were mostly your mess for less. Let's just take my mess and hand over to somebody else. There's an acknowledgement that we have to actually get more efficient in what we do within our state-owned organizations, and also on the public sector side. And there's also an element of actually fostering competition within that space. So allowing competition and not actually crowding out competition. And then obviously a lot more collaborative with private sector going forward, and specifically in the logistics space around that. So it's not a quick win. I wish I could say there was the minister had had a magical wand that could instantly change, but these are journeys that we're going to have to take, and they're going to be longish, but with pain as we go through, and we're going to have pain. There is no skirting around that. The consumer and the economy as a whole is still taking strain.
Wendy, and this is going to be my last question on this speech. I want us to talk about other things that could stimulate small business. I found somehow that the way that speech was so honest, brutally honest about government shortcomings, they never call them failures, you know, challenges, that the minister almost came across as decampaigning a party that wants to retain power next year.
Look, I think it's important to acknowledge when you have had shortfalls, and I think that's a first step of winning, to say we have had a shortfall on this one. Yeah. And I think the minister is indirectly calling, you know, those who are experts and those who are able to collaborate and make this country work in terms of our economy. Yeah. So for me, it's not a decampaigning, but it's also a cry to say we are in this together. We need to come to the table and discuss how we're taking our country forward. Okay.
So you told me about the mini boss business, but of course you also found of Virtue Business Solutions. And I'd like to ask you, what are the trends looking like? What's happening in the small business sector? What are the industries that are doing better, that are showing better growth, and maybe some people should be looking at them to get into business? And what is not working?
I think for a start, Rams, we need to understand that, you know, we can't just do business here in South Africa as small businesses. And I say this with my fellow entrepreneurs very often, that don't look at South Africa only. There are other countries. There are agreements with the AfCFTA, you know, the Africa Free Trade Agreements. There's many other opportunities where you can actually do business outside the country and get paid in dollars and euros and pounds. Yeah. And so that's what I'm advocating for at the moment, to say, look beyond South Africa. Look beyond South Africa. Those, I think for me, those are the trends. And of course, as my fellow panelist has raised, you know, some of the sectors that have done well, which is your tourism sector, and I've seen recently government issuing out, in collaboration with the Department of Tourism, a fund that assists those who are in the tourism industry through CIFA, and making sure that, you know, that sector is supported, because we can. And recently I saw an ad by Trevor Noah, beautiful ad, promoting South Africa. And right now we are at a prime time where we can, you know, ride the wave of winning and say, reposition South Africa as a destination for tourism, and also not only destination for tourism, rebrand the country and say, we are winners. We are able to turn things around.
Hasnain, when I hear things like what Wendy's saying, and also concepts like AGOA, you know, I tend to think that we are disingenuous. These tend to benefit big players anyway. You know, AGOA has been placed as this opportunity for people in the agricultural sector. But if you look deep about who are the people who can export product to the US and earn those dollars that Wendy speaks about, who are the people who play in the tourism sector? You know, not the small tour guide there, but the big guys who can bring in big numbers and host them. I tend to think that the small person is left outside the arena a bit.
I'm glad you brought up AGOA and the reconfirmation of it. I think it's the golden gift we've not really taken advantage within the sector, the small and medium business sector. I think the larger players have been able to figure out a path around using AGOA. As a country that has 30% still small businesses, we're not really open to this opportunity. We need to understand, how do we expose these opportunities to the small and medium sector and find ways to actually exploit AGOA, because AGOA has benefits, has been there for almost 20 years, I think, since George Bush's days, the second George Bush. And we've not really fully exploited it. There's an opportunity there that, in terms of just small market sizes, getting, whether it's small trinkets, whether it's gifts, whether it's furniture, it's clothing, we've not really pushed that out and exposed that. I mean, we've now have opportunities in terms of exposing through websites and understanding what's available. When we have a market window through our own social media platforms, we expose those social media platforms to more than just the South African window. And I fully support the fact that we tend to be a bit myopic in our world. We think the world ends and stops at the Cape Town Harbour and ends at the Zimbabwean border. There is a lot more out there in terms of opportunities, and these agreements are in place. Double tax agreements have been put in place. SARS have gotten very good at actually creating double tax agreements for dealing with countries on the continent. There is opportunity, and maybe big business needs to step in a little bit and help and guide that to open these things up. But they are there. We just haven't figured out how to actually position it, that the small and medium business can take advantage of these.
Is it also possible that it's just poor PR? Maybe small businesses are benefiting from these opportunities. We just don't get to hear about it.
I think there's probably more that can be done. If you look in terms of when there was a threat of the loss of AGOA, I was surprised. I think it was a low single digits, the impact to the economy. I would expect it to have been much more severe, given that the American economy is the biggest economy in the world, that we haven't taken full advantage of what's on offer to us. I mean, aren't you competing against other nations that also export to the US? But there is still this benefit of AGOA that somehow we're not fully taking advantage of. It should have a bigger impact and a positive impact on South Africa's small trading environment.
I want us to start talking about the positives, because there has to be positives, Wendy, right? I mean, there has to be things that are happening out there that are amazing, where government is supporting, where, you know, corporates are supporting, where SMEs are doing amazing stuff. Mm-hmm. But that's going to take us a longish conversation, right? Mm-hmm. So what I'd like us to do, maybe probably we take a break, so that then I hope we finish this conversation on a positive note. We leave people hopeful, them smiling, and not them thinking that the budget went wrong.
It's gloom and doom
for us. I don't want us to be doom and gloom people, although I'd like us to be very honest. So we're going to do that when we come back. We take a little break. Don't move that dial. We shall see you on the other side.